The air inside the prestigious Sterling private equity bank was a study in understated affluence, be it from the towering bookshelves lined with leather-bound first editions, to the floor-to-ceiling windows inviting the golden hush of late afternoon light, to the antique furniture that oozed old money refinement. The setting guaranteed a seven-star elegance under any and all circumstances, be they pleasant or otherwise. Sitting behind a century-old grand mahogany desk, the senior bank manager exuded a composed authority that came with 25 years of catering to the ultra-wealthy. His impeccably tailored suit, jade cufflinks, and regal posture were so meticulously refined that he effortlessly concealed the second-hand embarrassment he felt for the illicit May-December couple currently seated before him. David Walker, the December half of the embarrassing duo, was having a rather sophisticated meltdown as he just learned that he hadn't been a client of this bank for nearly 12 years. The revelation was stunning, as David was a powerful international attorney who embodied wealth, charm, and invincibility. Every credit card tucked in David's bespoke suit, including the black and platinum cards, was stamped Sterling Private Bank. Every card was active. David knew it personally, as he just used it to pay for breakfast for himself and his pregnant young mistress at the Ritz-Carlton. Seated beside David was the mistress in question, Hava Lloyd, a 26-year-old of unquestionable beauty who carried herself with a calculated poise. Wearing a vintage Chanel sundress draped effortlessly over her enviable figure, she'd styled her hair in a flawless updo meant to perfectly frame her, thus presenting to the bank manager a profile that had left many men in ruins. Hava was well aware of her allure, but she also understood an uncomfortable truth. All men admired beautiful women, yet few trusted them. That's why she found the bank manager's gaze so revolutionary. Perhaps it was his years of practice etiquette catering to the rich and spoiled, or perhaps it was Hava's extended belly, swollen with David's first child, that tempered his expression. Whatever it was, as they watched David unravel between them, the bank manager held Hava's smile with a look that offered not the judgment and disdain she was used to, but utter respect, something she'd never received before. This, Hava thought to herself, her pulse quickening at the smell of old money and the bank manager's exceptional treatment of her. I need more of this. I deserve to be looked at like this. Hava expected the respectful looks to fix permanently once she was officially David's second wife, an outcome she'd worked toward since first laying eyes on him at a charity fundraiser. After 3 months of seducing him, she was pregnant and had extracted a promise from David to divorce his wife of 35 years, Roberta Walker, before their child was born. As a down payment on that promise, Hava demanded accommodations, a luxury condo only in her name in an exclusive celebrity building in downtown Los Angeles. David had reluctantly complied, and so here they sat at the bank, with David holding the deed to the Bel Air mansion he shared with Roberta. He was attempting to secure a $2 million HELOC loan for Hava's palace, all without his wife's knowledge or consent. But things hadn't gone to plan. "What do you mean this deed is invalid?" David mumbled, his expression tightening with disbelief as he stared at the papers the bank manager showed him. "It can't be. There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Mr. Walker," the bank manager respectfully replied. "As I've already explained, the deed you possess is outdated. This is a copy of the current relevant deed, filed with the Los Angeles County Court of Records. It clearly states that your home belongs solely to Mrs. Walker." "No," David echoed, his voice a strained whisper. "Roberta and I bought this house together 25 years ago. We sat right in this very bank and signed the paperwork together. My name was on this deed. So what's changed?" Watching Walker openly admit his attempt to leverage a massive debt against his wife's long-term investment was nothing short of staggering, but the bank manager remained composed, showing no outward reaction as his eyes skimmed the information on his computer screen. The deed was amended 12 years ago, he told David evenly. The property was transferred into the irrevocable Walker Family Trust, which is registered in the state of South Dakota and managed exclusively out of our headquarters there. David's face flushed. But what the hell is the Walker Family Trust? I've never heard of it. Are you sure you're not mixing us up with some other client named Walker? With a practiced air of regret, the bank manager produced a crisp, official-looking document from his printer and slid it across his polished desk to David. The Walker Family Trust was established jointly by both Mrs. Walker and you. You both signed the transfer papers, and you both agreed Mrs. Walker would be the sole trustee and beneficiary. David's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the trust copies. The David Walker signature scrawled at the bottom was undeniably his. But how could it be? Well, David stammered with deep humiliation as he tried to avoid Hava's eyes. 12 years ago I was very ill. Oh yes, that's it, I was very ill. Almost comatose. I could have died. I guess some of my memory has never recovered. Hava's eyes narrowed at the pathetic lie, but the bank manager's respectful expression did not waver as he simply said, "Of course," his tone impeccably neutral as he slid all copies of the relevant paperwork toward David in a polite but firm signal that it was time for this embarrassing conversation to end. "Feel free to keep these for your records," he added. This attempt to dismiss him without a scene caused a momentary return of David's arrogance. He lifted his chin, squared his shoulders, and pushed the offending document back across the desk. "No need," he declared, shaking off the weight of the conversation. "I'll sort this out with Roberta myself. In the meantime, I require a cashier's check for $700,000 from my private account. Please facilitate that immediately." The bank manager spoke with a chilling finality. "Your salary, bonuses, stock dividends, real estate, luxury cars, health insurance policies, all were absorbed into the Walker Family Trust 12 years ago. You submitted the paperwork yourself, Mr. Walker, on your own letterhead with your own signature. As of now, every asset in this bank belongs solely to Mrs. Walker's trust. There are no accounts in your name, no records. In our system, you don't exist. But I have keys to the rental properties. We use them all the time, don't we, baby?" David raged as he looked to Hava for backup. Mimicking the bank manager's exquisite poise, Hava nodded her support while remaining silent and unreadable. "See? Total access." David's voice wavered. "I drive whatever I want. The Aston Martin's parked outside right now. And these..." David yanked a handful of gleaming black and platinum cards from his wallet and tossed them onto the desk like talismans against the impossible. "All in my name. All from this bank. We used this one at breakfast this morning, and you're telling me I don't exist?" The bank manager didn't flinch. "Not as an individual client, Mr. Walker. You're listed as an employee of Mrs. Walker's trust. Your cards, vehicles, and properties, they all exist under that capacity in our system. But teller access? You have none. So if you need cash as an employee, there's a drive-through ATM out back. It's open 24/7 and your daily limit," a pause as the bank manager checked the screen with the flick of the eyes, "is $10,000. Employee." The word swirled in David's head as his world contracted. A deafening silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. He blinked, his mind refusing to understand. While he spiraled, Hava processed the situation with a cold calculation. So, David Walker, California's sharpest litigator and the billionaire prize Hava had teased, trapped, and seduced for 8 months, was, in truth, dead broke. For 12 years, he had lived under the quiet dominion of his wife, Roberta. She'd let him roam free, let him buy the cars, the houses, the lovers, while never once revealing the strings she held. She let David think he had all the control, when in fact David Walker was nothing. It was a devastating blow to Hava's carefully laid plans. The downtown condo was meant to be a quick flip to a waiting buyer, an untraceable, laundered transaction David would never suspect. But now, that plan was dead. Every dollar she had intended to siphon from this man had vanished, and the golden nest she'd been weaving was suddenly gone. A lesser woman might have bolted, but Hava was undeterred. She'd set sights on becoming the second Mrs. David Walker, and that's what she was going to be. David might be broke, but he was still a founding partner at Walker and Grove, California's most prestigious white shoe law firm, and he still carried tremendous social and political influence. So back to playing the long game and showing David that she was a valuable investment. There would no doubt be another opportunity to rinse him, or better yet, his wife, Roberta. The bank manager silently watched as Hava's expression melted into tender concern, and she placed a gentle hand on David's shoulder. "Sweetie, it'll be okay," he watched her softly murmur into Walker's ear. "We can live off my salary. All that matters is that we have each other." With a Herculean effort, David Walker forced a smile, his face a ghost of the man he once was. He turned to Hava, cradling her face with a reverence that bordered on delusion. "This is just a temporary hiccup, babe," he told her, his voice trembling as he forced reassurance into the lie. "You are amazing and so selfless. Not to worry, I'll get this sorted, and then I'm going to give you and our child the life you both deserve." Hava smiled sweetly, tilting her head just so, her fingers tracing soothing circles on his arm. "Yes, David," she thought to herself, "one way or the other you will." Roberta Walker was a striking woman of 57, a vision of effortless elegance and commanding presence. With a personal fortune stretching into the billions, she could have been untouchable, yet she carried herself with a rare, unshakable authenticity. Even when she was draped in couture and adorned with the quiet opulence of old money, she never needed to prove her worth. It was woven into the very fabric of her being. Roberta was a self-made billionaire, having created the Creole-inspired coffeehouse bookshop chain called May We, Baby, from the ground up. The idea had been inspired by her love of global literature and a trip to West Africa, where she learned the secret to roasting good beans. Upon her return home, she immediately opened a tiny storefront in the heart of Compton, California. Nearly 30 years later, and May We, Baby now dominated the coffee shop market in America's urban sanctuaries and parts of West Africa. It had been a wild concept back then, combining coffee with Black comfort and generational wealth, but nearly 560 storefronts later, May We, Baby thrived, serving the Black diaspora Roberta cherished. Roberta now used her wealth to fund scholarships for Black education and to offer micro grants to budding Black entrepreneurs. She was more powerful than she had ever aspired to be, and extremely well respected, as people regarded Roberta as a shining example of what strong, smart women could achieve.
And yet, for decades, Roberta had played the fool. David Walker, Roberta's husband of 35 years, had betrayed their vows almost from the moment they said, "I do." His affairs were never-ending, indiscreet, and painful, as he openly paraded his conquests like trophies. He did it while basking in the knowledge that Roberta would never leave him. She had low self-esteem when they married, and was also a woman of faith. She believed in honoring her vows, believed that love, true love, was built on endurance, and so she forgave David again and again, convincing herself he never truly meant to hurt her. Then came David's affair with Samantha, Roberta's younger sister. She wouldn't have believed it if she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, hadn't stood there frozen in the dim glow of the hallway, watching as David and Samantha tangled themselves in her sheets, oblivious, reckless, desecrating everything she had built. Roberta had expected fury, a violent outburst, the kind that shattered glass and echoed with screams of betrayal. But none came. Instead, she simply turned and walked away, retreating to the cold, impersonal confines of one of their guest bedrooms. There, she sat in silence, staring at the wall, waiting for the pain to consume her. And it nearly did. The weight of their betrayal pressed against her chest, rendering her mute, immobile. Grief poured through her like ice in her veins, and for a moment she thought it might break her completely. But then something shifted, a spark in the darkness. Not sorrow, not despair, something richer, more refined. Revenge.
Pain crystallized into something pure and absolute. By morning, she had made up her mind. She would not break, they would. She would not burn, they would. Both of them would have to pay with individual punishments that cut at the very heart of who they actually were. She started with Samantha. First, Roberta stopped speaking to her sister. She deleted her contact and blocked all phone calls and emails. If Samantha tried to visit any of Roberta's properties, Roberta's security was instructed to turn her away. Next came the social purge. As Roberta's youngest sibling, Samantha had grown up in the shadow of her sister's wealth, spending her adult years indulging in its privileges. From exclusive movie premieres and celebrity galas to first-class travel and limitless shopping sprees, she moved through life with an air of entitlement. But that ended the moment Roberta decided it would. Every front row seat at Fashion Week, gone. Every luxury brand PR junket, gone. The annual Met Gala, gone. Even the extravagant shopping sprees, from Rodeo Drive to Dubai, all were taken away. Next came Samantha's Mulholland Drive home, a lavish gift from an indulgent older sister. While she did not evict Samantha, Roberta did shut off the utilities, the pool man, the security, and private car service. Samantha was informed that those perks were no longer available. If she wanted to pay for them herself, she was more than welcome to get a job. The rift between the sisters was immediate and impossible to ignore. Their family, usually so tight-knit, could only watch in confusion as Roberta and Samantha, once inseparable, suddenly fell apart. None of them understood why. Samantha, for her part, claimed shock. She couldn't think of a single thing she'd done to upset Roberta. And when Marcus, their middle sibling, tried to intervene, it was to no use. Roberta remained steadfast in her silence. And just to make her position unmistakably clear, Roberta withdrew completely from the family. No more birthday parties, no baby showers, no holidays or Juneteenth cookouts, no graduations, no weddings, not even family funerals. It was a swift, brutal exile, one Roberta firmly placed at Samantha's doorstep. Anyone who dared question it, talk to Samantha. Anyone who dared question Roberta, consider yourself erased too. Fearful of losing their connection to their wealthy aunt, the family stopped reaching out, and soon Samantha's pleas for reconciliation faded to a distant white noise. Years passed, and Samantha married a man and had 5 children, children she couldn't afford. Her first real plea to Roberta for money came wrapped in a desperate request on behalf of the kids. Samantha was begging to be let back into Roberta's life solely as a financial lifeboat for her nieces and nephews, for family. Roberta's response was swift and calculated. She would help, but only through an irrevocable trust fund for Samantha's children, managed solely by their brother Marcus. It was a generous gesture, more than Samantha deserved, but again the message was crystal clear. While Roberta would make sure her nieces and nephews didn't starve, she would never forgive their mother. Marcus disapproved. A woman of God should forgive, he told Roberta. He pleaded for mercy, for reconciliation, for the family to heal. Roberta's response was blunt. Lilith was a woman of God too. When Marcus did not relent and kept pressing the issue, Roberta finally told him the truth about David and Samantha, about their betrayal. The shift was immediate. Marcus, horrified by the story, had gone to Samantha himself. Samantha's calls immediately stopped. Her messages ceased. Samantha finally retreated to silence. Samantha's humiliation wasn't Roberta's only reward. During the years she spent denying her sister, she had done the complete opposite with her husband David. His revenge trap was far more elaborate and satisfying, with its multiple layers of deception requiring a massive amount of patience. It began with a single sheet of paper. When they first married, Roberta and David were young and broke and didn't even know what a prenuptial agreement was. But 2 decades and $1 billion later, Roberta was fully aware of California's community property rules. Realizing David would be entitled to half her fortune, she decided not to divorce him and instead have a one-page post-nuptial agreement drawn up, a simple document with an ironclad infidelity clause that would prevent David from ever claiming alimony or assets. Her attorney's draft was so thin and discreet it had been easy to slide it across the breakfast table one unremarkable Saturday morning 12 years ago, while David was absorbed in entering his latest golf scores into a country club's online database. Tucked among some random tax forms she insisted needed signing, Roberta watched with silent glee as David signed the post-nup with careless confidence, not even bothering to glance at the text before he kissed Roberta's cheek and strode out the door, no doubt to meet some new lover. Watching him leave, Roberta's fingers curled around her coffee cup with deep satisfaction. It had begun, her slow march towards revenge. It was a small victory that had taken weeks to execute, but it had been achieved. Her future secured, it was on to phase 2. Her next revenge move was to buy David out of his founding shares in Roberta's May We Baby coffee empire. She had given him the shares as an anniversary present, but the truth was he never really supported her and never truly recognized the magnitude of her achievements beyond spending her millions on other women. So Roberta waited again for the perfect moment, which finally came one night 12 years ago when David arrived home drunk from a strip club. Stumbling through the door, the scent of booze and other women clinging to his collar, Roberta guided him to the sofa and placed a fresh document before him. An incredible real estate opportunity in the Cayman Islands, she told him. A strong bid had to be faxed before midnight. All he had to do was sign, just there. David had barely looked at the page as he signed it. Then he pulled to his feet and staggered off to the shower, all the while telling Roberta she should install a stripper pole in their bedroom to keep things fresh. Studying the legally binding document, Roberta smiled to see him disappear up the winding staircase. The agreement was fully transparent, with Roberta agreeing to pay David a multi-million-dollar lump sum for his interest in May We Baby, and she did pay him every cent. As soon as her attorney had finalized the transaction, Roberta had wired the generous settlement directly into a new offshore bank account she'd opened in the Cayman Islands, solely in David's name. Days later, Roberta replaced David's May We Baby corporate card with a platinum one linked to his Cayman account, and this sleight of hand completed the buyout. David never noticed the credit card swap. He studied his credit cards as closely as his marriage. And so Roberta began taking her morning espresso with a trip to David's online account statement, where she watched in real time as he bled his buyout settlement dry, paying for each late model Porsche and Cartier bracelet for his various women using his own funds, and not his wife's like he thought. The lavish vacations, vintage champagne bottled at 7-star resorts, all were charged to the ever-dwindling reserve. And when that card finally declined, his buyout money long spent, she felt keen satisfaction in slipping another new platinum card into his wallet, this one financed by the newly created Walker Family Trust. Roberta was eager for him to use it, to leave a paper trail showing he'd fiscally accepted the terms of the trust. And he had unwittingly complied, spending like a madman on bespoke suits, imported cigars, and bottles of Cristal popped in dimly lit gentlemen's lounges with women half his age. It was damage he could never undo and never disprove to a future divorce judge. The third step was harder and more important. Roberta's real estate portfolio, all properties bought with her earnings, some with David's name on the deeds and others without, all fell under California's community property laws. Even with the backdated post-nuptial agreement, David could make claims, and that fact particularly gnawed at Roberta. She'd found the properties herself, managed them all without David's help, and increased their value as investments. The Bel Air mansion, in particular, she'd bought against David's wishes, back when the neighborhood wasn't zoned into the Tony Billionaire's enclave. She'd spent $2 million, a fortune at the time, but today it was worth $60 million. And yet David barely lived there, except to shower after he cheated or to showcase his success with lavish business parties. She wanted him off the deed, not just out of a sense of fairness, but owning that grand masterpiece of a home outright from their marriage would be a massive statement to David, a thunderclap reckoning he could not ignore. But that move, as delicious a fantasy as it was, carried weight beyond Roberta's reach. A slow siphoning of the credit cards she floated to David was one thing. The full-scale takeover of their property portfolio required legitimate transfers and binding legal notarizations, signatures that could not be fabricated or coerced in a fleeting moment of distraction. The attorneys and notaries she had used before, so willing, so complicit in the smaller deceptions, would never risk their professional credentials on millions in real estate. It was too risky. Roberta knew when to push and when to wait, and she decided to be satisfied with the victories she had already secured. The post-nuptial agreement was already a huge win, the quiet surgical removal of David's shares in May. Wee Baby was a corporate masterstroke. She should stop here, Roberta told herself, and she almost convinced herself that she would. But fate had other plans. It was a rare rainy night in Los Angeles when Ethan Grove arrived at Roberta's front door. The sound of his Ferrari screeching to an unceremonious stop in the long, sweeping driveway of her estate was foreign and alarming, and by the time she rushed to the door, Ethan was taking up her front door frame, his clothes disheveled, face streaked with rage, and a gleaming butcher's knife in his hand. "Where is he?" Ethan had hissed out of his mind with rage. "I'll kill him! Where is he?" Roberta stood in her marble entryway, her expression unreadable as she took in the erratic rise and fall of Ethan's chest, the wild sheen of his eyes. His entire body trembled, his breath a ragged thing between clenched teeth. She had seen that look before, in the mirror when her discovery of David and Samantha sent a seizure of pure pain through her body that only came from ground-shattering betrayal. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, took Ethan's wrist, and quietly led him inside. The mansion swallowed them whole, its vast, opulent silence pressing in as she guided Ethan past marble statues and gleaming chandeliers to the parlor, David's favorite room, though he was hardly ever there. Roberta sat Ethan down, her movements fluid, precise. She poured a whiskey first, letting the burn of it coat his throat before chasing it with strong coffee. Ethan drank both beverages in desperate gulps, the butcher knife remaining on the table between them, a silent witness to his unraveling. All the while Ethan drank and sobbed, Roberta was silent. She didn't push him to speak, refused to pry. They had known each other for too long to rush his grief in any way. Instead, she settled into the chair across from him, waiting as only someone who had mastered patience could. Whatever David did this time, it had to be extremely bad to drive a man like Ethan to do his own wet work. So she waited, letting him come to the words on his own and hoping to help in any way she could. And maybe she could help. It had already been 3 years since Roberta cut David out of her business and got him to sign the post-nuptial agreement. Perhaps she could help Ethan similarly. If David was embezzling funds from their firm or worse, blackmailing clients, Roberta was determined to keep Ethan clean because Ethan Grove was the exact opposite of David Walker. He was a good man who'd proven himself loyal in every way. And so she sat quietly and waited for Ethan to find the words. No rush, no manipulation. Whatever he needed, she would help. Yet, despite thinking she had prepared for the worst, nothing could have prepared Roberta for the tale Ethan finally shared. As she listened to him unpack his nightmare scenario, her face twisted more and more at the revelation that the David Walker she'd married, a man she'd once admired above all other, was gone forever, and in his place was a monster she could have never imagined, but one she vowed to ruin at all costs.
David Walker paced the luxurious penthouse he'd retreated to with Hava. Its floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a stunning view of the Los Angeles skyline, yet the open-concept masterpiece felt mocking now that he knew he couldn't afford it. David stood with the hunched shoulders of a man carved out of failure. His whiskey glass shook in his grip, untouched, as if drinking from it would be the final surrender. His eyes, wild and hollow, darted across the room, searching for something, anything to ground him. "She took it all," he whispered, as if saying it out loud might make it less real. "Every cent, every account, every investment, gone." Hava Lloyd sat across from him, perched on the edge of the velvet sofa, her legs crossed in a way that suggested both comfort and control. She pressed a hand against the small swell of her belly, the universal pose of a loving, worried mother-to-be. But inside, she felt nothing but contempt. Weak. He was so weak. The man she had spent months wrapping around her finger, the man whose name carried weight, whose fortune had drawn her in like a moth to a flame, was unraveling before her eyes. She had expected rage, war, a call to arms. Instead, he was pacing in circles like a wounded animal, caged by his own mistakes. She forced her voice into silk. "I can't believe she did this to you, baby. After everything you've given her? It's so cruel." David barked out a laugh that had no humor, just raw, bitter defeat. "Cruel? It's execution. I can't believe Roberta planned this." For years he dragged a hand down his face, eyes rimmed red. "If what the bank manager said is true, she's legally untouchable. She left me with nothing." Nothing. That word clanged inside Hava's head like an alarm bell. Nothing wasn't an option, not for her, not for the child she carried, not for the life she had clawed toward with manicured hands and a smile that could melt ice. She had played the role well, the devoted mistress, the breath of fresh air, the one who made him feel like a man again after years in the shadow of his wife. But that wasn't enough. She hadn't signed up for a broken man. She hadn't signed up for scraps. She needed control, and she would take it. Hava let out a soft, thoughtful sigh, lowering her gaze like she was deep in contemplation. Then she looked up, eyes full of something just hopeful enough to be dangerous. "Maybe there's a way to fix this," she murmured. David barely registered her words. He was too lost, too consumed by his own failure to see the trap she was setting. He didn't notice the way her fingers ghosted over her phone, the recording app already open. She reached for David's phone and calmly copied his contact for Roberta. She had to admit she was impressed. Roberta had played the longest game in history. She was smart, but Hava was smarter, and she knew how to play dirty too. "Why don't you talk to your attorney, see what they can do?" Hava said softly. "I am an attorney," David bellowed, more to himself than to her. Hava rolled her eyes. Some attorney, she thought, too blind to see this coming. She watched, unmoved, as David gulped down his drink, straightened his tie, and squared his shoulders. "She's not getting away with this. She's not." Hava watched in silence as he stormed out. Then, with a slow, satisfied exhale, she checked her diamond-encrusted Cartier watch, a gift from David, or rather, from Roberta. 30 minutes for the drive home, 15 for a screaming match with his wife, another 30 before he'd finally crawl to his attorney. She set the alarm. In exactly 75 minutes, Hava would send a text to Roberta Walker, and Roberta would respond immediately. Hava knew this because Hava understood rich people, not just the husbands but the wives too. She had studied Roberta Walker before she ever set sights on David. She knew the woman stood on business and operated every facet of her life like a mafioso. Hava had expected Roberta to discard David once their affair and the pregnancy was revealed. She never imagined that Roberta was a dozen steps ahead and had kept David on a leash for over a decade. That was absolutely brilliant revenge, the kind of work that played to the bone if you could get it. Now Hava was going to get it too, if not from David, then from his smarter, more ruthless better half. Roberta Walker was going to pay for the baby David Walker couldn't, whether she wanted to or not. Because Hava Lloyd was also ruthless, and she wasn't going to be taking no for an answer. Now, 9 years after Ethan's fateful visit, Roberta Walker knelt beside a bed of lush, violently red roses in her massive Bel Air garden. They were the kind of roses that looked like they had been painted with fresh blood, an appropriate backdrop for the location of her husband's demise. Still beautiful and poised despite being a decade older, Roberta wore a crisp linen pantsuit, pristine despite the dirt clinging to her gloved fingers. Sunlight dappled through the grand oak trees of her Bel Air estate, casting a golden glow over her carefully curated paradise. She was humming when she heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A man's voice, sharp, indignant, sliced through the warm air. "Roberta!" David bellowed as he frantically crossed the lawn. Without looking up, a smile crept into the corners of Roberta's mouth. David Walker stormed towards his wife of 35 years with his tailored blazer hanging off him like a battle flag. His chiseled jaw from earlier at the bank now gave way to a face slackened by fear. And his hair, which had been a thick, proud lion's mane earlier that morning during breakfast with Hava, was now a soggy mop of curls, having melted when his consciousness exploded over his banking situation. Clearly this David Walker was not the same man who'd tried to use his wife's credit to buy his mistress a home. Instead, this new David was reeling from a reality he still didn't quite comprehend. An irrevocable trust, Roberta? Really? He spat as he reached her in the garden. Did you really think you could do it without telling me? Roberta grinned and calmly snipped a rose. But I did tell you, darling. You just weren't listening to me. You never did. David's face darkened. Bullshit. This is fraud and theft, and you're not going to get away with it. Roberta finally turned to him, amused. I'm the fraud? You tried to take out a loan on my house to buy your latest whore a condo. David was caught quick with the words, quickly realizing that the bank manager had a fiduciary responsibility to call Roberta the moment he and Hava left the bank. David waved it away, attempting to keep the upper hand. That's not the point. You created a trust without my consent, and that's illegal. I am going to sue you for divorce and financial distress. At this, Roberta did something that made David's stomach tighten. She smiled. And not just any smile, but a full, rich, delighted smile. The kind of smile a woman gives when she knows something you don't. The smile that comes when she's savoring every second of your ignorance. Well, you can try, David, but just know there's a paper trail stretching back 12 years, Roberta said softly. 12 years of formal, legally binding documentation where you declared your guilt for cheating on me and trying to systematically dismantle the life we built together. In fact, you felt so guilty that it was you that suggested the post-nuptial agreement, the family trust, and that we put all our assets under my control. Post what? David blinked in shock. Post-nuptial agreement, dear. Signed 12 years ago. Dissolution of your shares in my company, also signed 12 years ago. And then with the help of your partner, Ethan, We established the Walker Family Trust 9 years ago. David's expression shifted, confusion flashing beneath the rage. Ethan? He barked, his stomach twisting into knots. What the hell does Ethan have to do with this? Why don't you go ask him, dear? He's been waiting 9 agonizing years to explain it to you. Roberta tilted her head, smiling sweetly, saying no more. A long, heavy silence hung between them, thick and buzzing with something unseen. David, for all his arrogance, felt it, the icy hand of realization creeping up his spine. He'd always been good at sniffing out lies, and Roberta wasn't lying. She was enjoying herself far too much. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Then, in a huff, he turned on his heel and stormed back to his car. Silently, Roberta watched him drive off, allowing herself a wry, satisfying chuckle as she plucked another rose. Ethan Grove sat languishing in his high-rise Los Angeles office, the city stretching out beneath him like a kingdom he had long since conquered. Sunlight slanted through the glass walls, setting fire to the crystal tumbler in his hand, the deep amber bourbon within catching the light. He swirled it idly, letting the aroma rise, but he wasn't drinking. Not yet. Not until he arrived. David Walker, his partner, oldest friend and greatest enemy. 9 long years Ethan had waited for this moment. 9 years of careful restraint, of feigned camaraderie, of watching David revel in his own arrogance, never once suspecting the ground beneath him was slowly, inexorably, being stripped away. It had taken patience, precision to complete the slow, methodical dismantling of a man who never once saw it coming. And finally today, the moment had arrived. He knows. He's coming to you now. Roberta's text had been the gunshot that signaled the final act of a beautifully orchestrated performance, and Ethan had barely been able to contain himself since reading it. He checked his Rolex again and again, savoring the anticipation like a rare delicacy. He leaned back in his chair, every nerve attuned to the inevitability of what was about to unfold. And then it happened. The doors to his office burst open with a crack, and there he was, David Walker. He stormed inside, his face contorted in rage, but beneath it, beneath the bravado and the bluster, Ethan saw it. Panic, desperation, the dawning horror of a man realizing too late that he had been playing the wrong game all along. Ethan exhaled slowly, savoring the expression he'd waited years to see. David slammed the door behind him, pacing, wild, erratic. She stole from me, Ethan, everything, every cent, every asset, every goddamn thing we built. Ethan took his time, tilting his head as if considering. Who stole from you? Roberta. David spat the name like venom. That woman, my wife, she went behind my back and used my money to set up an irrevocable trust, one I never authorized. It's fraud, Ethan. She's taken everything. Ethan leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach. Ah. David's eyes flared. That's all you have to say? Ah. Ethan shrugged. Well, it is a rather sophisticated legal maneuver, and entirely binding. You have to admire that. David's nostrils flared, his fists clenching. It's theft. It's illegal. I want to sue her. I want to file criminal charges. Ethan swirled his bourbon, watching the liquid settle before meeting David's gaze with quiet amusement. Yeah, well, good luck with that. David's face twisted. Roberta said you're involved somehow. How, Ethan? Tell me what's going on. Ethan reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a crisp folder. He slid it across the polished surface, then tapped it once, the sound reverberating through the quiet room. David's fingers twitched as he flipped open the folder, his eyes scanning the pages. And there, Staring back at him in cruel finality was his own handwriting, his own signature, on trust documents created on his own letterhead. David's mouth went dry. "This is impossible," he said. "I never." "Transferred everything to Roberta," Ethan said. "Oh, but you did, David. You transferred everything, all marital assets. You signed it all away, right here in this very office, with full, irreversible compliance." David's breathing shallowed. "But how? When?" "9 years ago," Ethan said, voice steady, almost amused. "Well, 12, technically. Roberta started it, did a fine job, but there were cracks. I sealed them, made it airtight." He leaned in. "You underestimated her, David. She schooled me on you, said the only thing you would ever regret losing was money. That's all he cares about, Ethan. Money, not people. Take his money and David will cease to exist, but don't rush it. Let him believe he's the smartest in the room. When the truth hits, it'll be the best joke of your life." Ethan smiled. "And she was right. Watching you strut around, convinced you had us fooled. Breathtaking." David's breathing shallowed as Ethan continued. "I made sure you signed the papers here in the office," Ethan confirmed. "We presented them as operational documents, knowing you never read anything operational. It's all just muscle memory for you, signing on the big dotted line with your big brown pen behind your big brown desk." David swayed on his feet, his world shifting beneath him. "No." "Oh, yes, David, yes." Ethan exhaled, counting off on his fingers. "Everything is Roberta's, David. Your house, cars, artwork, your shares in May We Baby, your shares in our firm, Walker and Grove, the Bel Air house. Hell, even your new golf clubs belong to Roberta." Ethan let out a hearty laugh as David spiraled, his eyes darting around the room as though searching for an escape route. "Why, Ethan," his voice cracked, "you're my partner, my best friend of 40 years. Why would you do this to me?" "Beth," Ethan said solidly, his smile having eroded to a slow-burning rage. "Beth?" David said, stumbling over more confusion. "Beth, my wife, David, the love of my life," Ethan raged. "You, her, 9 years ago. Take your time, David. I'm sure it'll all come back to you." It took a moment of reflection before David's blood turned to stone. His throat tightened as he recalled the events. He felt the room tilt. "Oh, God, Ethan, Save it." Ethan's voice was ice. "I've heard every excuse in my head. Not one was good enough. 40 years of friendship. You were there when I met Beth. You were best man at our wedding and godfather to our kids. You knew better than anyone that I built everything for her and would die for her." His voice dropped to a razor's edge. "And you still broke her, just like you broke Samantha." David's breath hitched. "Samantha? Samantha who?" Ethan gave a slow smile. "Jesus, David, if your sister-in-law was worth losing your marriage over, the least you could do is remember her name." David looked stunned, and Ethan chuckled wryly. "Yes, now he remembers," Ethan said. "Fun fact, David, screwing your sister-in-law in your own marriage bed can be very risky, because you never know when your wife might come home early from work." David Walker slowly sat down, his stomach wretched into knots, his brow sweating. He gasped as he siphoned oxygen. "I didn't, I mean, it wasn't, this was all so long ago," he whispered. 12 years since Samantha, 9 years since Beth," Ethan said. David looked up in desperation. "But I was a different man back then, Ethan. You remember, you were there. I was very sick. I had a sex addiction and—" Ethan nodded. A fake diagnosis you cooked up to get us out of a sexual harassment lawsuit from one of our paralegals. Yes, David, I remember. David stared out, his mind flooding with consequences. He gave Ethan an incredulous look. You two, you and Roberta, you both waited 12 years to ruin me? Ethan's smirk returned, razor sharp. Not just us. Ethan's gaze was cold. All the women here, too. The ones you seduced, harassed, or destroyed professionally when they resisted you. Paralegals, secretaries, junior partners, they all played their part. He stepped forward, his voice low. They'll testify the Walker Family Trust was your idea, that you begged for it to make things right with your wife. Sure, they've been compensated, but I doubt it compares to the satisfaction of watching you scramble here today. A pause, his tone darkening. Every one of them is waiting on the other side of that door. They want to see you walk out, fully aware of what you've lost. 9 years we've all waited, David. We're ready to celebrate. David clutched the chair for support. I'll go public. I'll expose you all. It was a hollow threat, made with barely a whisper. Ethan chuckled. By all means, David, Sue. Scream. Get loud so everyone can know what a fool you are. David swallowed, his chest rising and falling in ragged bursts. For the first time in his life, he was afraid. Ethan watched silently as David staggered toward the door, his entire body trembling, and opened it and walked out. Ethan exhaled slowly, savoring the moment like the last sip of an aged whiskey. He watched with glee as the once untouchable David Walker opened the door to thunderous applause. Dozens of women, all with champagne, cheered and toasted as he staggered down the hallway past the very people he had used and discarded over the years. Paralegals, personal assistants, notaries, all women whose names he'd never bothered to remember, whose trust he'd broken with the same ease as signing a deal. They had each played their part. A gentle redirection here, a conveniently misrepresented document there, smiles that masked a secret, small favors done in silent alliance. And as David disappeared beyond the glass doors, a ripple of laughter spread through them, through the entire office, soft at first, then swelling, a hushed chorus of justice long overdue. It wasn't just Roberta and Ethan who'd won the day. It was all of them. Back in his office, Ethan shut the door and then let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He exhaled as the weight of it all finally settled in his chest. Beth. God, what it had taken to find his way back to her, to trust her again, to believe in them again. David's betrayal had nearly shattered them, but in the end, he couldn't walk away. He wouldn't. Because Beth wasn't just a mistake wrapped in regret. She wasn't just another casualty of David Walker's destruction. She was Ethan's wife, his partner and soulmate. And soulmates, he had come to learn, were human too. She had been preyed upon, manipulated, broken in a way she never should have been. But when it all came crashing down, she had chosen him. And Ethan, against every instinct screaming at him to let go, had chosen her too, for better or worse. And so, with time, patience, and years of therapy, they rebuilt. Not to what they once were. Some wounds left scars too deep for that, but to something else, something real, something strong. 9 years and 3 sons, and their marriage still stood. Maybe not perfect, but still standing thanks to Roberta. She had guided Ethan through the darkest moments, had talked him down during the times when he'd call her to say that he couldn't wait any longer, and that he was going to confront David. Wait, Roberta had whispered over 1,000 times in the past decade. I promise you, when he finally falls, it will be delicious. Ethan reached for his keys, already picturing the drive home. Tonight, when he pulled into that driveway, there would be something new waiting for him, something unfamiliar but long overdue. Closure. He had no idea what that would feel like. Couldn't wait to find out. But regardless, Roberta had been right. What he was feeling now, indeed, delicious. Hava sat behind the wheel of David's parked Mercedes, her manicured fingers poised, steady. With a quiet inhale, she tapped the record button on her phone. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. She hit playback. Her own voice came through crisp and clear. Perfect. Satisfied, she slipped the phone into her Gucci purse, tucking it neatly between a diamond-studded money clip and a compact. Then, with slow precision, she exhaled, her gaze catching the reflection in the rearview mirror. Every detail was flawless. Soft curls cascading down, makeup airbrushed to perfection, the fitted dress draped elegantly over her growing belly. This had to be perfect. A final glance. Then she turned the key. The Mercedes purred to life, rolling onto the long, winding road toward the towering iron gates of the Walker estate. As if expecting her, they parted without hesitation. Hava swallowed, her fingers tightening on the leather steering wheel. The mansion rose before her, an architectural marvel, a fortress of power, of wealth, of intent. It was the kind of house built not just with money, but with strategy, a declaration, not just a home. Hava Park then sat still for a moment, listening to the hum of her own breath. Then, with the grace of someone born to maneuver in opulence, she stepped out. Her heels clicked against the stone driveway, punctuating the silence as she approached the grand front door. The chime echoed through the house, rich and resonant, like a cathedral hymn. The door swung open, revealing a poised maid, silent and expectant. No words were exchanged. A subtle gesture was all it took for Hava to step inside, where she was led through a labyrinth of quiet luxury. Glittering chandeliers, gilded mirrors, furniture that belonged more in a museum than a home. The air smelled of wealth, subtle and restrained, like fresh lilies and old money. At last they reached the kitchen. Roberta sat at the vast marble island bathed in morning light. The gleam of her elegantly graying hair was almost silver gold, catching the sun with an effortless radiance. She was stunning, but not in the way of youth. Her beauty was carved from experience, from time. An ivory silk blouse lay crisp against her frame, diamond studs glinting with the faintest movement. In her manicured hands, a porcelain coffee cup rested. Another cup waited on the counter. "I assume you like coffee. Everyone in your generation does," Roberta murmured, gesturing as she poured an exclusive blend from My Quee Baby into the empty mug. She offered it to Hava, along with an array of sugar and milk alternatives spread neatly beside it. Decaf, of course, for the baby. Hava hesitated, searching for malice in the woman's voice. There was none, just cool observation, detached and clinical, like a scientist watching an experiment unfold. With careful grace, she took the seat opposite, lifted the cup but didn't drink. "Thank you," she said evenly. A beat of silence. Then Roberta took a delicate sip of her own coffee and stated, almost casually, "So you're sleeping with my husband," Roberta said, her words slicing through the air, clean and sharp as glass. Hava didn't flinch. Instead, she straightened, meeting Roberta's gaze without wavering. "Yes," she answered simply. Roberta nodded once as if confirming something she already knew. "And the child?" "It's definitely David's," Hava replied, her tone unshaken. Something unreadable flickered across Roberta's eyes, but not surprise. "Interesting," she murmured, setting her cup down with a soft clink. "David never wanted children. He was wary of the responsibility. Hava's spine stiffened. "He's changed," she said, and Roberta only nodded, her gaze sharpening as she pinned Hava with quiet authority. "So, what is it you want from me, Miss Lloyd?" Roberta asked. Hava exhaled, steadying herself. She had rehearsed this over and over. "David said he was going to leave you," she said carefully, "that we were going to be a family." A soft chuckle slipped from Roberta's lips, devoid of amusement. She shook her head. "They always say that," she mused, "but do go on." "I know he betrayed you," Hava insisted, her voice firm. "But my child shouldn't become collateral damage. My child deserves a future in the standard of living his father promised." Roberta leaned in slightly, her presence razor sharp. "Tell me, Hava, did David ever tell you why all this happened?"
"Because he cheated on you," Hava scoffed. "Lots of people get cheated on, Mrs. Walker. As a businesswoman, you should know how to take a loss. Going DEF-CON on your partner's future seems rather immature." Roberta studied her, as if debating how much to reveal. Then, with a quiet, almost eerie calm, she asked, "Have you ever heard of a man named Ethan Grove?" Hava rolled her eyes. "Of course I have. I'm not stupid. He's David's law partner and oldest friend." Roberta nodded. 12 years ago, Miss Lloyd, I found David in bed with my sister. I was ready to leave the marriage with half, but Ethan convinced me to stay. He said David never meant any real harm. 3 years later, David impregnated Ethan's wife, Beth. David never wanted kids, so he forced her into an abortion. It went wrong. She bled, panicked, called David, but he'd already blocked her. She had no choice but to call her husband, who raced home and took her to the ER. Once she was settled, Ethan came here to kill David. I stopped him and said it'd be much more satisfying to take everything he thought he controlled. We did that and then waited for him to notice. No one expected it to take 12 years. He might have never known if not for you, Miss Lloyd. You pushed David to finally make the mistake we needed. If your child has lost everything, don't blame me. Blame yourself." Hava's eyes almost hid the explosion of shock in her brain. Almost. Roberta smiled knowingly. "What's particularly amusing is how you and I have never met before today, and yet you sit here, in the house I built before you were even born, seething with contempt for me, contempt for my marriage, for everything I created. Why? What exactly have I taken from you, Miss Lloyd?" Deep shame crossed Hava's face, but then she quickly rebounded with false dignity. Roberta watched Hava meticulously gather her purse and pull to her feet. "I can see you intend to stall the inevitable, Mrs. Walker, and create a scandal. That's unfortunate, as I assure you, I don't burn easily. My baby has rights, and this isn't over. David and I will see you in court." "You might show up to court, but David won't," Roberta said smoothly. "By now he's vanished, blocked your calls, cleared out his things. Your access to him? Gone. But since you're with child, here's a hint. His mother lives in Pasadena, in a big old house I bought her 20 years ago when she retired. That's where he'll be hiding. Good luck, Miss Lloyd." They said nothing more as the maid suddenly reappeared and escorted Hava from the premises. Back in the car, Hava slid behind the driver's seat, her pulse steady as she started the engine and then quickly steered it down the drive. She stopped to wait for the gate to open and finally exhaled. Reaching into her Gucci purse, her fingers closed around her phone. A single tap and Roberta's voice played back. "You might show up to court, but David won't." Hava smiled, satisfaction curling at the edges of her lips. She had it, every word, the proof she needed. She stole a quick glance at the rearview mirror, smoothing a sleek baby hair back into place, still flawless, still in control. Then she realized the gate hadn't opened. Before she could react, a sharp knock rapped against the driver's side window. Hava's breath hitched. Her gaze snapped up, meeting Roberta's cool, knowing smile. Slowly, reluctantly, Hava rolled down the window. Roberta leaned in, her voice smooth like silk, but laced with steel. Just a friendly reminder, California is a two-party consent state. Recording someone, whether over the phone, in person, or most importantly, inside their own home, without their knowledge is a felony. With a baby on the way, you might want to think long and hard about that, Miss Lloyd. Have a lovely day. Hava swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry as she watched Roberta turn and stroll to the gate and manually enter a security code with effortless grace. The iron behemoth groaned to life, swinging open in silent evacuation, and for a moment, Hava sat frozen, gripping the steering wheel, her mind racing. She watched as Roberta, without another glance, hopped into a waiting golf cart and then drove it back up the driveway toward the house. Nothing. She had accomplished and achieved nothing coming here except learning facts about David that proved he'd been a poor gamble for her future. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel as the truth settled in, heavy and suffocating. The life she had envisioned, the security, the luxury, the effortless power, had all been a mirage. And now, she was trapped in its fading illusion, with a baby daddy she'd have to fight. A shiver of dread curled through her spine. With quiet resignation, she put the car in drive and rolled forward, watching Roberta's estate shrink in her rearview mirror. The gates yawned open for her exodus, and as she crossed the threshold, leaving behind the empire she had once dreamed of usurping, she couldn't bear to look back.